The kindness chain in the small, picturesque town of Maple Grove, nestled among rolling hills and vibrant maple trees. 11-year-old Emma Parker was known as the kind of kid everyone wanted as a friend. Her cheerful smile could brighten anyone's day, and her helpful nature was admired by neighbors young and old. It was a chilly November morning, and frost dusted the grass like powdered sugar. Emma zipped up her red jacket and hopped on her bike, pedaling toward Maple Grove Elementary. Her route took her past Mr. Miller's house, a quaint little home with a garden that bloomed in the spring but now lay dormant beneath piles of golden leaves. Emma slowed down as she spotted Mr. Miller in his yard. The elderly man, who often waved to her from his porch, was hunched over a rake, struggling to gather the stubborn leaves. His face was lined with effort, and the crisp morning air made his breath visible as little puffs of white. Emma pulled over. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," she called, hopping off her bike. "Do you need some help?" Mr. Miller straightened, leaning on his rake. "Oh, Emma, good morning. You're kind to offer, but don't you have school to get to?" "I've got a few minutes," Emma said, flashing her signature smile. She glanced at the yard. "That's a lot of leaves for one person to handle." Before he could protest, Emma dashed to his shed, grabbed a spare rake, and began working alongside him. Together they made quick progress, chatting as they worked. Mr. Miller told her stories about his childhood, the adventures he used to have in Maple Grove, and how much the town had changed over the years. When the last pile was neatly gathered, Mr. Miller sighed in relief. "Thank you, Emma. You didn't have to stop, but you've made my day much easier." Emma shrugged. "I'm glad I could help." She waved goodbye and pedaled off to school, her heart feeling warm despite the cold air. Mr. Miller stood there for a moment, watching her ride away. Her kindness lingered with him all day. Later that afternoon, while shopping at the local grocery store, he noticed a young mother struggling to carry several grocery bags while balancing her squirming toddler on one hip. Without a second thought, Mr. Miller approached her. "Here, let me help you with those," he said, taking 2 of the bags. The mother looked at him, surprised but grateful. "Thank you so much," she said, her face lighting up. "It's rare to meet someone so kind these days." As Mr. Miller walked her to her car, he felt a deep satisfaction. Emma's small gesture had inspired him to pass it on. The young mother, touched by his kindness, decided to continue the chain. That evening, after putting her toddler to bed, she baked a batch of chocolate chip cookies. The next morning she delivered them to her neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who rarely left her house. Mrs. Thompson was astonished by the thoughtful gesture. "You didn't have to do this," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "It's just a little something to brighten your day," the mother replied. The cookies and the kind words stayed with Miss Thompson. She sat down later that afternoon to write a letter to her grandson, who lived in another state. In the letter, she told him about the cookies and encouraged him to do something kind for someone that week. The grandson, inspired by his grandmother's words, spent his Saturday helping at a community garden in his neighborhood. And so the chain of kindness spread, moving from person to person, reaching far beyond Maple Grove. Meanwhile, Emma had no idea the impact her small act had sparked. It wasn't until a month later, during the town's annual winter festival, that she overheard a group of neighbors talking about how much kinder Maple Grove had felt lately. "It's like the whole town has been inspired to help each other," one neighbor said. "It all started with that little girl who helped Mr. Miller with his leaves," another added. Emma's cheeks turned pink as she realized they were talking about her. She hadn't thought much of raking leaves that morning. It was just something she did because it felt right. As the festival lights twinkled and the scent of hot cocoa filled the air, Emma looked around at her town. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not for the recognition, but for living in a place where kindness could ripple outward and make a real difference.